Pretty typical because it's pretty typical because it's just accounts.
It's hard to know, I guess.
Yeah.
Just working it. Scott's here.
It's for the record.
It's attendance.
It's an official meeting.
Yeah.
Betty, thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot.
You're okay.
like that.
That's fine. Not a problem.
I guess just ask what you'd like to know and explain what you'd like to explain. And
Sure.
he brought one of his nice folders for us.
Yes.
That'll help us know a little more.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much of this is applicable to the meeting, but I want to make sure that you all kind of understand the foundation of what we do and how we can help local churches. So we were established in 1980 by the Holston Conference. So we're a separate organization from the conference. Our connection is, because we're part of the United Methodist Church, and the Methodist Church is a connectional denomination, which is a lot different than, say, Baptists. Baptists are loose autonomous churches. So the forefathers of the Methodist Church, in their wisdom, decided that there would be a connection with everybody. And to kind of give you the brief overview of that, each conference or each territory is divided into conferences. And we're in the Holston Conference, and then we're part of the SCJ, Southeastern Jurisdiction, and then part of the National Church, and then of course we're part of the International Church. So each conference has a foundation related to it. And so if you're in Virginia, there's the Virginia Foundation. If you're in New York, there's the New Frontier Foundation. You know, they got a little creative with their name. And here at Holston is the Holston Foundation. So we've been around since '80. We have a separate board of directors that is what you might call kind of a self-perpetuating board, in that the board nominates other potential board members and we vote on them into the board. That's important because I don't serve under appointment by the bishop. I'm hired by the board. And the bishop in the Holston Conference serves ex officio on our board of directors with a vote. So we're a auxiliary organization to the conference. Can't make that more can't state that more importantly. And so that translates into our relationship with the local church, because when we work with local churches, you're not working with the conference. And now that may mean a lot to some people and mean nothing to others, you know, but one of my biggest communication issues to get over is when I go to a church and they're like, you know, you haven't helped us, and all we do is give you money and you never help us. It's like, who do you think I'm with? Oh, the conference. They may have issues with the conference, you know, and I'm like, no, I'm not.
Right.
Or sometimes a well-intending pastor will introduce me to preach and say, Paul's from the conference, and it's like, no, that's not the case. But so it gets a little muddied, so local churches deal with the conference in a lot of different ways. Obviously with appointment process, the 10% that you send up to the conference, none of that has to do with us. So now our funding as an organization comes from the management fees that we charge upon the investments that we do for the local church or for organizations, or even endowments that we create with donors. Our investment fees are extremely reasonable, and the big reason for that, one of the big reasons, is because back in 1990, around 90, two individuals came to us and said they wanted to handle all of our investments for free. And that is Patriot Investments off of Dutchtown Road. So a normal practice for a foundation in the country would be that the foundation has its management fee, and then they have a broker such as Merrill Lynch or Bank of America or somebody like that, and then that's tacked on. We don't have that situation, which we're extremely blessed not to have that. So all of our ministry, entire budget is funded by that. We're not funded by the conference, and we do not fundraise for the foundation. So when I talk to local churches or to individuals, I don't say, will you make a gift to the foundation? That keeps it really clean. In fact, I think a lot of pastors appreciate that because they like for us to come in and talk about giving, and we're not pitching ourselves. Years ago, the Holston Foundation made a decision to put resources into plan giving. Not every Methodist foundation in the country even deals with plan giving. Most all do investments, but then majority work on loans. So they're big into the loan game. We are not. We do not do loans, but we work with plan gifts. And so we've had a person in that role for several years. And a plan gift is basically any gift that's a strategic gift that requires some thought, perhaps talking to a professional advisor, but the majority of that is bequest, which is just putting the church in your will. I think one of the best things for churches to understand or to communicate to their congregation is that a local church like this has the support and the back office support of the foundation. Many church members are making decisions in their estates. Obviously, take care of your children, take care of grandchildren, but then quite a few church members make decisions about the things that have impacted their lives over the years. Maybe they're alma mater, University of Tennessee. Maybe it's Carson University where I used to work. And many times they don't realize that, wow, this church could benefit from a gift from my estate. And a lot of people have fears of that, believe it or not. They have apprehension about leaving a gift to the local church. And curious if y'all. Yes. Give me some good examples why there'd be. That's a perfect one. Mismanagement. What else would somebody might have some concerns?
Crazy pastor.
Save them all. Save them all, pastors.
Or they just the itinerary.
Yes. Yeah.
System.
Yeah.
Who's gonna? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who'll be here when I'm gone? Yeah. What about the issues that are dividing our denomination currently?
Yeah.
That's one. You said mismanagement. Somebody says that I really want this to benefit the choir, and then suddenly they're recarpeting the sanctuary with it. Trustees get a hold of the money, as trustees do. They want all the money.
Poor Scott.
I love giving trustees a hard time. Nobody wants to be a trustee in a church. That's like I'm the HOA president of my community. That's fine. I didn't know what I was getting into. Yeah. So when churches or when church leadership and the people in the pew realize that they can have a confidential conversation with the foundation, and we address the investment side of it, how it's going to be invested. We address the management of it, selection and use criteria. But most importantly right now, we talk about contingencies. What are the contingencies that we dream or we envision together? And a great example of that is Hiwassee College. The folks that have made a estate gift to Hiwassee let's go back to the 60s or 70s, many of them had a contingency because they saw the handwriting on the wall even back then, because it's always been an institution that struggled because it educated pastors and teachers. So we have quite a few endowments that have a contingency in it for the gift to go now to Tennessee Wesleyan or Emory Henry or back to the church. So when I talk to a donor and they're like, I want my gift to benefit the local church plus Holston Home for children, and that's another great example. We often have endowments that span out to different organizations because they have different interests. Then I'll ask the question like, well, what happens if your church closes or merges? Do you want the gift to follow the church? And many times it's yes, and then other times it's no, that's a great question, how about we do this? If this church closes or merges with another church, how about if it goes and benefits Heifer International, or UMCOR, or something else of significance? Holston Home for Children, what if that is no longer in existence? What if they go off the rails and they don't share your values, What then? And so we have those discussions. And then we also build into it a lot of stewardship, excuse me, where relatives get reports on the gift and what it's doing and the impact that it's making. So I can't emphasize enough that when churches finally kind of get it and say, wait a minute, there's this organization and all of that. In fact, I just hired somebody in July. He's a retired minister, 40 years of experience, and he's now the planned giving guy. But all of that is the conversations, the working with the individual, the drafting the document. There's no charge for that. I mean, it's just what we do. So that could be extremely helpful. So we do the investments and the planned giving, and that's, and grants. I don't know if this church has ever received a grant. Do y'all recall?
During the pandemic or something,
No.
Did you have food pantry?
You mean from the foundation?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
We've got one in Gatlinburg,
Mm-hmm.
food pantry.
Well, we have grants that we provide to local churches. We give out about $350,000 a year. So if you have a ministry that you need funding, or maybe you want to expand somehow, grant sizes usually go up to about $5,000. And we have a committee that meets in the spring. We evaluate. We usually get about 70 proposals, and we evaluate them and figure out what the best use of the funds are. And those grants come from the estate gifts that we've had those conversations with. When a donor says, I want to do something for the Methodist Church in my estate, but it doesn't necessarily need to be specifically to my church. And a great example, I'm working with two bishops right now, two retired bishops. And one is saying that his gift, his estate will go to help people on the margins. And so we have this whole list of potential organizations for organizations that minister to the underserved, the minorities, the poor, all of that. So that would be in our wheelhouse eventually in the spring. And then when a church says, we've got this ministry to prisoners or to post-incarcerated, then his gift would be considered to make that grant. So I really invite you to look at our process, which begins January 1st, and you can find it on our website. It's a simple grant application, and we'd love to get money here to help y'all. So that's the foundation. That's what we do. Let me see if I can.
Bob,
Yes.
what are your assets under management?
Great question. Of course, that's a moving target based on the market. We're at about 100 and I believe 55 million currently. If you pass that on around. We were at our height, we were at 170 million. And of course, 2022 was a downturn, so that affected us.
What type of investments typically are you involved in?
Great question. And in this packet, it'll show you. let's go to the left side. This, on the left side of this document, it's about 2 in. Our largest portfolio or fund is the Balanced Growth Fund. And this is as of July 31st numbers. So this is, we came down a little bit in August. But this is invested in 60% of it is equities and 40% is kind of a fixed return, which is the treasury bills and some bonds. Your money's in here because they're endowments. So every endowment, most endowments I should say, are in this fund. In the second page you could see, well, let me back up. The account return on for July 31st was we were up 13.16%, 13.16%. But then August I think we came down a little bit. The second page you could see the original assets placed in the foundation, and then growth being the green. And of course ongoing assets to occur. We have the other options for short-term investments, which in the past, before interest rates were raised, were really attractive to churches. If you had a CD, the churches just kept rolling over, and they'd come to us, and we put it in the short-term income fund. Now what we're pushing is the money market, because you can get some great money markets without having to tie it up like you do a CD. So short-term income fund, and then the intermediate income fund is somewhat similar to that. And then the big one, or the other option, and we have about 3 churches that asked us to create this, is the 100% equity fund. And the only reason why we have this, and you can see it's up 20.13% for the year. The only reason why we have this is because churches will do their own mix, and they don't want a 60-40, they may want a 70-30, and so they'll do 70% of their fund, of their account into this, and 30% into the intermediate income fund. A lot of this money is Church Street money, because they're the ones that really came to us first and asked us to create this, and then we've had some others tag on to that. So those are the investments that we offer.
Do you get involved in mutual funds?
We do not, but the funds that we are in act like mutual funds. All this money is paired together in Charles Schwab, which is why when churches withdraw from us, there's a process that is not immediately, because at the first of the month we do new money in and new money out, and we rebalance. So it's in a pooled type fund. Now the income funds is a pooled income fund, but the other is treated like a mutual fund. We're basically through index funds, S&P 500, TIAA-CREF, those types of index funds in Charles Schwab. So, and then I had mentioned earlier, we were talking about how endowments work. If you look at this document, this is our rolling 3-year average chart. And it really speaks to the way in which endowments are prudently invested and prudently spent. This is a fund that was put in with us back in 1998. Kind of an odd amount, but $115,490 on the left side. And you can see the ending value for each year up to 2022. If you go over here to the third column from the right, is the actual returns from the Balanced Growth Fund, which that fund was subjected to. And obviously red's not good, black is good. And then, but the neat thing is, that's important here, is the fact that every year, even though there's a red negative return, there's still money being distributed. So it's a disciplined approach to continually funding ministry without getting crazy. Or, and this happens often, I'll have a church finance committee call, and they'll say, you know, this year the market's doing terrible, and we're not going to ask for any distributions. And then that's not the right approach, because if it's an endowment and it's in a disciplined approach, then there should still be a distribution available. And we always encourage people to take their distribution. There's value in being conservative, but often when we're being conservative out of fear, then we're missing opportunity for ministry. And so we encourage that. Now, when it hits a 3-year downturn, this is a bit of a misnomer. If you look up to 98, 99, and then start in 2000, 2000 through 2002 had worse of an impact than actually 2008, because it was 3 years in a row. If that fund had not had such good returns in 98 and 99, then we might have said, first of all, there'd be a stop if it goes to the historic dollar value. We'd say no. But we may have cautioned, let's just wait, because we want it to start to build up. But fortunately for this situation, they had that amazing growth 2 years before.
Do you invest in real estate?
Yes, part of our portfolio is real estate.
Is that what happened in 2008?
No, that's the overall market.
Okay.
Yes, but part of our portfolio has a little bit of real estate in it. But that was everybody in 2008. We actually did better in UT's endowment. I love telling people that. They dropped more than we did. But you see, in 2009, we came back really well. So back to the rolling 3-year average, you take your values at the end of the year, you have a 3-year average that you determine, which is the middle column, and then you apply a 0 to 7% spending rate to the total market value. We recommend 4%, which is probably what you all have been practicing, so that you're not going crazy with it. And so even though you have a fund that started at $115,000 here, and some people get a little frustrated because it's like, we know there's $115,000 there at the foundation. Why are you only advising we spend $5,000 this year? Well, we're trying to keep it in perpetuity. We're trying to keep it as purchasing value. If this was a donor that we worked with, then we would have had these conversations on the front end. And if they were not comfortable with that disciplined type of spending approach, then I would encourage them not to make it an endowment. And I'd say just be a savings account that the church could call in and get money from. It won't last in perpetuity, but that may be what your desire is, and that's fine. And I've worked with folks that had a quasi-endowment. Lady up in Baileyton said, I don't think anybody's going to know who I am in 20 years. I don't want the church supported solely by my endowment. So after 20 years, I want it to start to spin down. A lot of wisdom in that. Beauty of this is starting value $115,000, ending value of 2022, even with last year's jump off the cliff, $193,000 in the principal fund. It's spent $145,000 over those 25 years, or 23 years. I don't know. They keep changing this on me. So anyway, that's how the spending occurs.
The endowment agreements, I assume attorneys get involved in those.
Not necessarily, and I appreciate you asking that, because there is a page here on the left side, second page. You know, are there any attorneys in the room? Okay.
I think I know
Okay.
where you're going.
Yes. I'll deal with an attorney who calls me up and says, I have an individual who wants to do something with the foundation for the local church, and I'm drafting an agreement for him. And I'll say, well, we have an endowment agreement, and I'd love to work directly with the donor, have them sign it, and then all you have to do as an attorney is put it in their estate plan that, let's say, $50,000 is going to be sent to the John Smith Endowment at the Holston Foundation. That's all you got to do. Because then when I sign this with a donor, then, and we're so sophisticated at the foundation, we put it in a manila file folder in fireproof cabinets. That's been my contribution. Fireproof cabinets. And when the gift comes in, we dust it off, we figure it out, and then we follow it to the letter, what the donor's intention is. Some attorneys aren't comfortable with that, and they want to really lock it down. Part of the problem with that is when they write the agreement, or they don't pay attention to our agreement, we frequently get, and I'm dealing with Wesley House right now with this situation. They have an endowment they put in the foundation. It came from a state attorney involved, wonderful person, but the endowment says that interest from the bequest says interest from the endowment will be spent on whatever at Wesley House. So the attorney is saying you've got to put it in an income producing fund for interest. Type of thing. No, income from the endowment will be spent. So he's not comfortable with the balanced growth fund because it's earnings. And I'm telling him, if we put it in an income fund, you're going to see a whole lot less return because that's the short-term income and the intermediate income. So there's the language that occurs that's a misunderstanding from charitable work like we do, and then attorneys that do estates. And the other thing too is that oftentimes, and we deal with, and I'll speak to this in a minute, but we deal with gifts now scenarios too that are philanthropic that attorneys don't necessarily understand. And so if I have contact with a donor, even a donor working with an attorney, it's so much easier than just a donor working with the attorney and then it coming to us as an estate gift. I'll give you a good example. I did a seminar, because I do a seminar and I'd love to do it here, called Provide and Protect, or my colleague, Mark Gooden, who's our new hire, could do it. But we do a seminar, it addresses the qualities and attributes of wills, talks about end-of-life issues, and then finally talks about with how to make a charitable difference in your church. And so I did this seminar at Fountain City, and they required me to do it with an attorney. And so the attorney goes first, and he did great. But then he started talking about charitable stuff. And he was sharing stuff, charitable-minded, that weren't necessarily right, because that's not his specialty. And now I'm not an attorney, but my whole career has been in this and planned giving and whatnot. And so I had to get up and explain, no, that's not true, from a charitable thing, he said something like, if you're not happy with the foundation, you can always get your money back. And it's like, no, that would be a huge tax occurrence for somebody, and we don't necessarily return gifts. But a big part of it is that we do several vehicles that may be in this packet, but that donors should consider, individuals may want to consider, I don't think it's in here, that are tax beneficial to the donor, such as a charitable gift annuity. And a charitable gift annuity is a contract between a donor and the foundation. No attorneys involved at all. Simple contract. And when a donor does that, they make a gift, and then they receive lifetime income back to them like an annuity payment. But they get a big tax benefit on the front end potentially, and then the income back is tax-free up to about 70%. And then when the donor passes, whatever charity, whatever church, whatever organization that they want to benefit from the remainder in the fund goes directly to that organization. And we have people, once they get this, they call us back the next year. And they call us back the next year, and they keep doing more because they did their taxes, and they're like, wow, you know, I'm seeing a great benefit, tax saving benefit, and I've given to the government all my life, and I'm tired of giving to them. And so that's a great scenario. We also do a charitable remainder trust or charitable remainder unit trust, which does involve attorneys to structure the trust. And the same principle occurs, that your children or you and whatnot can benefit from the gift. Those are the type of stuff that, like, we kind of know a little better than your average estate planning attorney related to charitable giving. We handle real estate. We have a holding company that has taken on real estate, taken on the liability. Should an individual want to make a donation to the church and they want to make it done, they want to do it through real estate property, and then they make it to the foundation as the donation. We have the, like I said, the liability for it, and then eventually it's sold and it benefits the church. That's a great option for people to consider. The other thing, especially when you think about maybe end of the year and people looking at their portfolios, we're an easy way to give stock. People use us all the time. They'll donate the stock to our account at the foundation, and then we turn around and 100% of it goes to the charity or the church. We have some documentation that's necessary for that to make that work. But and again, as I started off talking, a lot of this I feel like people don't know we do at the foundation, and it's critical for some churches to understand that.
Paul, you mentioned that you are involved in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see, is there a place for reverse mortgages in estate planning?
You know, that's a tricky question. That kind of gets into non-charitable issues that we don't really deal with. You know, that's when somebody owns their home and then they're able to get payments back from basically taking their equity out and receiving that as income. And of course, at the end, then they don't own their home and it's out of their asset. What we do is we could do life estate reserved, where an individual gives their home and they live in their home and they're responsible for maintenance and taxes, and therefore the home is out of their estate and it goes to the charity of their choice after that occurs. So that's the only way we kind of get into that type of scenario.
You stay busy, don't you?
Yeah,
Goodness gracious.
we stay very busy.
What do you do in your spare time?
That's a great question. I actually teach history online. To a couple of colleges, and I enjoy it. That's kind of a passion thing, but yeah. Or take care of my kids. I have a stepdaughter who's at American University in D.C., so we're talking about 81. I know 81 very well, so take care of her up there. But yeah.
When I got you in Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have questions, like directly about or specifically about?
Yes, we asked Paul before you came in
Oh, okay.
about our particular, I heard you say they were endowments. Did you verify that they are endowments?
Let me do that. I have been told by Brenda Mills, who's our account manager, that we need fresh account sheets from you all. Our account sheets have, let's see, the scholarship fund, Don Thomas is the primary contact.
Yeah. you still have Scott Milligan on a few of those
Yep.
too.
Yeah, Scott Milligan. Okay, so the scholarship fund is an endowment.
And which, there's two scholarship funds, which
Yes.
one? are we
Oh,
talking
I'm sorry, Trinity UMC Knox Scholarship Fund is how I have it listed here. Building fund is an endowment. The general endowment is an endowment, of course. And there's a Dwight Patterson Scholarship is endowment.
Right.
Yeah. There are donor restrictions on that one, which I guess is from the will that's here.
Right.
And then I would like to work with, do you have an endowment committee or is that kind of not been operating?
We don't. I would say we don't.
We don't,
I'd say it's safe to say we don't.
Well,
Anything done, Carl would be looking at.
okay. I would like to, your endowment, permanent endowment fund charter is outdated significantly. And this happens all the time. And, you know, this was 1998. So the endowment charter has morphed since then. It's not even called the Permanent Endowment Fund anymore. It's called the Endowment, or the Endowment and Plan Giving Ministry Committee. That's Book of Discipline, probably 2016 or 2012. So that the Endowment Committee, which I know you say isn't operating, is now charged with not only handling endowments, but also promoting plan giving in the church. And I'll give you a good example. Burke's United Methodist in Chattanooga, they've been really strong on this. There's a fellow down there, Dan Bowman, and that's his thing at church. And he has me come preach. I preached there 3 times. They have a Legacy Sunday. They have this isn't very successful, but they have a display table during that time out in the lobby for people to come ask questions. But his committee is always thinking in terms of how do we keep it out there in front of our church members, especially those church members who have been long-term members. You know, I've talked to pastors all the time who say, God, Paul, I did a service, and in the working with the family, I found out that in lieu of flowers, you know, gifts, please make gifts available to the hospice, because the hospice was there for the last year of their life, or to University of Tennessee because they were a 1950s graduate. But you know, I haven't been at this church very long, but I know that they've been here and their grandchildren. We married them in 1950 as a couple, and then they raised their kids, and they didn't think of us. And so Dan's mission is frequently, not always, but frequently putting it out to the church saying, if you're doing your estate plan and you want to think about this church in your estate plan, talk to the foundation, and the foundation will help you do it in a way that's responsible. So that's what's kind of charged with an endowment ministry, plan giving ministry committee. I can send a draft charter to you all to look at, and then you have to have it chartered by a charge conference, and then assign somebody to say, hey, that'll be me. That'll be my championship. I'll champion that.
We do have a member that's expressed interest in doing that.
Oh.
He's just been tied up
Mm-hmm.
trying to get our computer working.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
But-
that would be good, and I can get ahold of him, and maybe we can all get
Mm-hmm.
together with you.
Yeah, and you know that's what our ministry is. And so when churches do that, we get very excited at the foundation because you know we had 50 churches in the conference. Now I know we're down to 500 something, but the foundation, we made a decision last year to continue to work with churches that have chosen to disaffiliate. So we still have 150-something churches in the conference that we're working with. In fact, I'm preaching at a church. I preached at a church. The last time I preached was at a disaffiliated church. Next Sunday, I'm preaching at a disaffiliated church. So even if individuals think in terms of, I don't think I'm going to be around if this denomination continues to do whatever thought is, we continue to work with those individuals.
I have a question for you. When these were set up then in late nineties, has there been any contributions to them since? I would guess not. Most people don't even know they're out there.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where we should be getting money into it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
There's been none go into it.
And see, that's an interesting question or issue too. There are two ways to promote planned giving in a church. One is that we do have these funds. If you're interested in offering scholarships to young people, we have two funds available to put money into. If you're interested in the building and maintenance of this church, we have a fund at the foundation you can contribute to, whether it's a current gift or whether it's in your estate. In estate planning, people can do that. Like one of the bishops, I'll give you a good example. One of the bishops I'm working with, retired bishop, he is going to make a contribution into his endowment in memory of his deceased spouse and a son. And I said, he wouldn't mind telling you who he is, but Bishop Looney. And I said, Bishop Looney, I said, you could do that, but that wouldn't truly memorialize them, because it would just go into the Looney Family Fund. I said, how about when you send your gift in, which is a stock gift, let's create an entire fund in their names. And he said, well, what would that do? And I said, well, in perpetuity, we would know about them too, and we would tell their story in addition to the Looney Family Fund. So if an individual wants to contribute to the maintenance and upkeep of this church, they could give to the maintenance fund that's here, or if it's a plain gift, then we could say, well, how about this? And it would serve the same purpose. There's no extra cost to having a different fund because everything's about total assets under management as far as fee, and then stewardship of it would be the same. Reporting would be, and the other thing too is that, you know, the committee would, like the Pattersons, the committee would, and future committees would see the, you know, Alma B. Smith Fund that was set up years ago. So you can contribute to existing funds and you can promote that here, but if you're talking plain giving, you can also offer that opportunity to do the other.
What's your history been with these endowments if they're challenged?
Challenged by
one of the parties, maybe the person giving it, or the person that was a relative to the donor?
Right. I'll give you a good example. That rarely happens. I'm working with a donor right now who had set up a $250,000 endowment with life insurance from his deceased spouse. And it's named after his spouse. And it's in the foundation, it's owned by the foundation. Well, the church has not done any kind of stewardship with the donor. In fact, the pastor won't even, you know, the donor's called him a couple times and the pastor won't return his phone call. So the challenge that he's making is, could the foundation work with him to redirect it for a different purpose? And we're going to do that, probably. We have I don't think we've ever been challenged legally for any type of donation or any type of setup that's come into the foundation and the management of it. Now, I have a donor I worked with in Sevierville just recently who set up a fund to benefit his church. And this was a little unusual, but it's kind of telling of what donors' attitudes these days. But he's young and you know, quite the business guy. You'd know his name if you knew Sevierville. And he said, Paul, what if I'm not satisfied with your performance? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, I mean, he started investing at 16. And he said, what if I don't like the return? I said, well, you know, our return's very competitive, but that's okay. And he said, what if I don't like where it's headed with the church, with the denomination? I said, well, here's what we're going to do. Let's make your fund, since it's a living donor, custodial. And I said, if you're not happy with our performance and you're not happy with the direction of the church or what have you, then we will release that fund back to you just like a church. However, I will not write you a check. It'll have to go to another organization. And he may choose, if he ever does it, and he hasn't done it yet, it's been 4 years, but he may choose like East Tennessee Foundation to have his endowment redirected. We did have one situation prior to my being in leadership I did not agree with, but a donor had created a fund and then their son had gotten into legal trouble, big legal trouble, and they were using their assets and they had our administration write the check back to them to help the son stay out of jail. And I don't agree with it because that's a major tax issue that they have to deal with the IRS, and you hope they deal with the IRS. But the majority of our funds with churches are custodial, and there's no issue there. I mean, I'll have a church call me and say, close it out, you know. And this happened with disaffiliation. We had several churches. It was sad because it was not ethical or legal, but you know, we had a church up in Morristown that had an endowment with us for $80,000 for years, and they closed the fund. And it turns out that's about how much their disaffiliation fee was. So they used an endowment to buy themselves out of the franchise, as I call it. So, but we couldn't do anything about it.
Sad.
It is sad.
Yeah.
Well, there's a church in Kingsport that their entire endowment is a colleague's, conference colleagues' grandparents' estate. And they've done a lot of that with their estate money.
Well, the reason I asked that legal
Yes,
question,
sir.
you know, you got a 2-page contract here,
Yeah.
and any attorney that would write a document like this is probably gonna be 15 or 20 pages.
Yes.
And so this would, out of necessity, would have to be silent on a number of issues.
Yeah.
And I could see that, or they could say, well, it's silent and challenge that.
Yeah.
But on the opposite end of this, or that comment, it's simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
And
We
I
keep it
like
simple.
Simplicity.
Yes. Well, and what I tell donors is that document is legally binding on us, but not legally binding on the donor. Once that gift has been fulfilled, well, I say that it's legally binding on us if it's an estate gift. I mean, it's against state law for us to take a state gift in and go a different direction than that the donor has signed. Now, we are extremely sensitive to undue influence. Very sensitive to undue influence. Which means that I had a donor contact me, and we had a working relationship for about 4 years, and she was finally ready to make the decision to do something for Holston Home. And I mean, I'd been at her kitchen table, her farm in Cleveland, several times, and then she said, Paul, this is so complicated, but I'm meeting my attorney in Cleveland, and I'd like for you to come with me and meet my attorney, and you can answer the questions that she might have. And I said, I will not do that. I cannot do that because of undue influence, and that opens us up to potentially the niece who's supposed to be receive the rest of the gift being able to sue. So I said, no, I'm not gonna be there. So we try to be very careful about that sort of thing. And we always ask individuals, are you taking care of your family? And you know, you do run into cases where there's a disinheritance occurring, and that's kind of between them and the family. Real quick, I had a meeting with a 95-year-old who was disinheriting his 3 children and leaving everything to his 60-something-year-old second wife and her son. And the second wife was not happy about the situation. It got down to, finally, I understood that the decision he was making was because his 3 children were extremely successful. I mean, one lived in Paris, New York City, attorney, doctor. And that the 43-year-old stepson, who was literally in the backyard picking up sticks while we were meeting, who his whole world was driving his stepdad to his doctor's appointments, had a learning disability, and the stepdad was concerned about his future. And so I asked him if his children knew, because it was obviously he loved his children, knew how much he loved them, and the decisions, the reason why he was making those decisions. He said, I've never really told them. So I encouraged him to fill out what they call an ethical will, which is an explanation of decisions you made. And one of those is to explain why this estate, it won't mean anything to them, but it'll mean the world to his wife and his stepson. So that's a disinheritance situation, but kind of a good story. Yeah. Now, can I give you some pointers on stewardship?
Yeah.
Do you all ask for people to give to the budget?
Do you mean?
The general fund at times.
Yeah. We recommend that you don't really call it the budget or general fund, but the mission and ministry of the church.
Yes, I always give to
Yeah.
our ministries.
Okay, give to our ministries, which obviously does involve payroll, does involve utilities, but so many churches, they'll have options to give to the budget, give to the food pantry, but we really recommend you take some of the language out, not that y'all are doing it. We really recommend that you have a spirit of generosity and 12 months a year, and not just budget time.
Right.
Like Commitment Sunday is the only time we talk about money. The churches that say 12 months a year, we're going to talk about the output of giving, such as occasionally have someone give a testimony, kind of a series of why do I give? Why do I give to this church? Can really encourage other people to be thinking about being generous. I mentioned that we're working with churches who disaffiliated. The reason why we're doing with that, continuing a partnership, is because we've always been focused on outcomes versus theology or versus other things. And churches that focus on the outcomes of ministry, that really fans the flame for greater generosity. The impact that this church is having, the food pantry, the people that are being ministered to, the preschool, the other ministries that this church has, even the in the walls type of stuff. The senior citizens that have a place for fellowship and to have connections after retirement and that kind of stuff is very important for churches.
Have you worked with many churches that were experiencing budget issues, that need to make some decisions, and if so, what was your guidance? And because ministries are something that nobody wants to make an adjustment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've got a personal view into it with my wife working on staff at a large downtown church that is seeing some issues, growth issues, And it's funny, I have the gentleman that introduced us, my former board chair, is no longer Methodist, and he sent me a screenshot of the one item in their weekly newsletter. He still gets the newsletter, and the screenshot was the giving. And the fact that they're down 147,000 this year, and that they're 8,000 below last week's offering was 8,000 below the target amount. So that's the one thing he pulled out of that newsletter to send to me. Which, when churches kind of have that, like, keep it in front of people, it depresses. I mean, I know you need to be transparent. Oh, okay. I know you need to be transparent about finances, but when it's kind of like, you know, it's like a football team going out after every play and coming over the sideline. The coach is like, "We're really losing." If anybody watched the game last night, I mean, the Austin Peay coach, man, he was like, you would have thought they were winning the game the whole time. So there's got to be a way to transition from showing the red, and then let's all worship together, you know, to celebrate what God's doing with expectation that our needs will be met. Because I think that's more of the Christian life. Now, if you're on the finance chair or treasurer, you know, you may be thinking more in terms of, well, that's great, but people got to step up. But if
and then where is that happy medium? I mean,
yes,
because, you know, there's definitely a need.
mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I guess just trying to figure out, people need to know.
Yes.
But they also, I don't know, it's like, how do you balance that?
I think that there are ways to reach the folks that are concerned, because they're going to step up, and maybe they give regularly, and then they say, okay, we're down, and this is important to us, and I'm going to write that check that'll get us back to where we're at. I don't think that's going to happen by having it always in the bulletin, but making it available maybe quarterly, maybe once a month, saying this is where we're at financially is good. I just think that you're right, there's a happy medium between Pollyannic, God will provide, and let's just do all the ministry we can. I mean, I've known ministers that it's like, God's going to meet our needs, so we're going to save the world. And then you're going, but we can't afford to pay your salary next year. You know? Yeah, and you asked the question, do we work churches? That's usually when we're called. You know, I get so frustrated with churches that say, we don't really need to talk about stewardship, because anytime there's a need, somebody usually steps up. Because, number one, you're robbing people of the essence of my sermon today. You're robbing them of the opportunity to be involved in what God's doing. But secondly, you're basically saying, we don't need a vision at this church, because when we have a problem, somebody's going to write the check. But boy, when I've done seminars to pastors about this sort of thing, I'll tell them, you may be the number one problem, because if you don't have a vision for your church, people aren't going to have a heart to invest. You know, they may invest because they want the place comfortable, they want to have good music, and if they bring a friend, they don't want to be embarrassed. So they might invest. But as far as moving the church out of the misery of always being behind, or hearing what great things that this church is doing in the community or around the world, a lot of that starts with the vision of the church, which isn't all on the pastor. You know, the lay have to have a vision as well.
I heard on the news this week, I think it might have been a Pew Research poll that was checking in on the data that was made available at the beginning of the or close to the beginning of the pandemic, when, you know, church attendance was low, and you know, and giving, you know, took a hit for a while.
Right.
And so so the research people were taking a look at that to review it, what has happened in the past 2 or so years. And the report was that giving has increased nationwide in churches. Now, I would have to, I searched for that article, or, I guess I could take more time to find that information. It'd be interesting to see whether the Pew Research people broke it down by denomination.
Right.
Perhaps, I'm not sure they took the time to do that, but, cause Methodists are kind of, I feel like we're just going through a very challenging time with disaffiliation on the back of the pandemic. But are you noticing or hearing about churches doing fairly well right now?
Yeah, we have quite a few that are. And part of the issue, and I hate to bring this up in this room, but part of it is the Methodists. We have aging congregations, and the Pew stuff. A lot of those churches are the community-based churches. That it's like the demographics of the church is lower than a mainstream denomination like Methodism, which applies to like Presbyterian, and a lot of that's related to a neighborhood type church as well. It's so funny because I see in my work the churches that were started in a neighborhood, like let's take a neighborhood of, Alcoa, back in the 60s, where they were in the neighborhood because the workers for Alcoa lived there, and they lived in the homes that were built by Alcoa for workers, and they were planted there, and they ministered, and church thrived. This may be down in Cleveland, and they're a plant type thing, and then things change, and the neighborhood goes down because it's no longer the working middle class, and that church is still there. Well, then the church starts to decline because people don't want to come into that neighborhood to attend a church, because if you had upper mobility, you moved out. So that's a big issue too for denominations like Methodism, where we were planted in neighborhoods to serve the community. And that might be a factor here, I'm not sure, but but the churches that I see that are thriving, they have a vision. They're very mission minded. I can be up in Southwest Virginia in the smallest church, and it's like they have so many ministries that they're more vibrant and active and well funded than another church that's kind of doing the navel gazing, so that's a big factor. Do you have a passion? I was up at a little church in Kingsport, and they were talking about their jeans ministry. I kept thinking, jeans ministry? What? So, and this lady came up to me and she says, you know a lot of people? And I said, yes. She said, we've been collecting jeans for the homeless and the working poor for about 3 months, and 2 Saturdays from now we're distributing them, and it's just me, and all these people are coming. We got to set out tables. I'm hoping people are going to support it in the church, but can you get me some volunteers? But that church was excited about giving away jeans, because that's that's a big need for the homeless. Yeah. And so they've been collecting jeans from their closets and from other things for several months. So that type of passion is really what drives a healthy church, and then the money comes, in my opinion.
Well, I don't want to keep you all day. How long? Yeah, I have to go. Jaron has to go to work. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. It was very
Well,
nice.
if you haven't talked to Brenda Mills yet, I invite you to give her a call as treasurer, and I guess the sheets might come through you to sign, or someone. Okay, I'll get them to Barbara, and Barbara can make sure they get to the right person.
Yes.
So,
Well, we thank you We thank you a million.
Oh, yeah.
For coming
That's fine.
today.